Riveting content. Empowering your life. Welcome to the Sphere. This episode is sponsored by
Sphere Exclusives. Looking for exclusive content from your favorite podcasts here at the Sphere? Head over to sphere.tv/Patreon and sign up today. Body by Royce. Body by Royce gives precision instruction to help you reach your fitness goals. Book your consultation today at area code 832-332-2407 or send an email to thebodybyroyce@gmail.com.
Houston Housewives of Finance are your unique gifts and talents on increasing your cash flow,
Do you
becoming
desire
your
to
own
belong
money
to a
manager,
community
and to
of
schedule
unity?
your complimentary
Visit
personal finance strategy.
KOGpassion.com
Contact
to
the
learn
Houston
more about
Housewives
the
of
Unleash
Finance
Your
today
Dopeness movement.
at 1-844-700-4463.
Hello, hello. Welcome to the Docs. We are here to inspire, inform, and to educate you on everything related to health and wellness. I am Dr. Keisha. I am your pathologist and your go-to for everything that's related to health and keeping in shape. You can catch me on Facebook at Dance Health Fitness LLC, and please check me on Instagram at KDMD_health. I've got the DJ Doc, who's been moving and very busy this weekend, huh?
Yeah. Oh, what's up, you guys? It's your girl, Dr. Kwanzaa, and Dr. Keisha. Keisha gonna stop coming here every week. She been like coming in here, just looks on fleek over here, and I'm like looking busted in my scrubs. Thanks.
No, you have the
No, it's
natural beauty.
Nah,
I have to spiff it to make it look
No, you don't. No, you don't.
do,
But
do.
it's your girl, Dr. Kwanzaa, the DJ doctor. I'm a board-certified emergency physician, and I'm just happy to be here with you guys for another amazing show. And how was your weekend, Dr. Keisha? Did you get into anything?
I always keep busy dancing, taking my daughter with me everywhere I go.
Yeah.
But we always make the Saturday a lazy day. So my
that's nice.
son is a Fortnite competitor.
Okay. All right. That's pretty funny.
Basically, he plays video games.
Yeah.
And then we order in and hang out and watch movies together.
Oh, that's nice. You know what was interesting? This last week, I was watching something on, I don't know, some network. I can't remember which one. But they were talking about how in gaming, the industry is starting to change and sort of move away from, I guess, the imagery of sort of a overweight, kind of sloppy male. And that they've actually encouraged players who are professional players are actually going to work out and doing performance training to get a little inside edge on their
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know if he's doing that part, but he's on the game a lot. That's how they communicate. That's how they hang out.
Yeah. I mean,
Fortnite.
it's pretty serious, I think, once you get...
It
I
is.
can't get into the online thing. I do play occasionally just for fun and just for some relaxation types of things. But I will say, in some areas, if you're playing the right kind of games, it can actually help with focus on some aspects in moderation. Obviously, I would never encourage anyone to look at a TV screen for hours on end. But in some... and actually, there are some studies that show that video games can help with focus and control and actually manual dexterity skills.
I can see that.
You know, thinking about how to incorporate that for things like the OR and stuff like that. So it's pretty little random Dr. Kwanzaa facts that she picks up over the week. But I had a good weekend, too. I actually... Shout out to Dr. Lakeisha, OBGYN, who had her first Oh Yes conference in Mississippi. We had a good time over the weekend. I got to DJ, and it was a good weekend, a long weekend, but I actually learned quite a bit. So shout out to all the speakers and presenters there and all the women who were motivated and inspired to Oh Yes a little bit more, and you can just use your imagination on that. But it was pretty inspiring overall. A lot of great medical information. kind of spun into everyday life and how you can make your life and your day-to-day experiences just a little bit more vibrant. So that was fun to be a part of.
Sounds wonderful.
It was cool. It was cool. We had a good time. But here we are. And so I don't know, from last week, you guys may remember we talked about bias in healthcare. And so this week we're just taking it a little bit further to show some explicit examples of bias and just racism in medicine, period. And so we have a topic today that, has been kind of done a lot in the media, I would say, but really just kind of looking at it from a different perspective and a different eye today. It was interesting to revisit the Tuskegee experiment and just go into that in a little bit more detail. But for those who don't know, the Tuskegee experiment was an experiment conducted in Tuskegee, Alabama, in the mid 1930s or so, and actually went on for about 40 years, believe it or not. And the reason this kind of comes into play in terms of racism and bias in healthcare was because this was a study that primarily focused on sharecroppers in not educated black men in the South, of course, in a time of extreme conflict and race relations in the United States. And so it was a pretty interesting topic to revisit, but that's what we're kind of jumping into today.
I'm ready. It's Black History Month, so we definitely need to know what happened in the past so we can make sure it does not repeat itself.
Right. And so the interesting thing about the Tuskegee experiment is that it sort of centers around a disease process, an infection called syphilis. And syphilis is a sexually transmitted infection. And it basically has three main phases with a couple phases in between. But the biggest thing for people to understand about syphilis is that there's a primary, secondary, and a tertiary or third phase of syphilis. But the most important thing that I want to comment about is that for syphilis, it's actually pretty easily treated. For a sexually transmitted infection, often treated with just one dose of penicillin.
Yep, that's it.
And the really scary part about it is that as the bacteria sort of invades a little bit further and you move into secondary and even latent syphilis, it actually becomes harder to diagnose until it's too late. So it's kind of like a big balloon effect. You kind of notice one thing. If you don't catch it right then, it can kind of swell out of control, and then everything really can deteriorate from there. And it happens over a long period of time. And so that part is probably one of the most important takeaways is to recognize it. But the interesting thing about syphilis, it's spread from direct contact with sores during vaginal, anal, or oral sex. And it has kind of a classical orientation that I'm sure Dr. Keisha can expound upon the picture part. And so primary syphilis presents as a chancre, or it's a painless ulcer or sore that's on the genitals, rectum, tongue, or lips. And that's usually the first indication that you have an infection. And actually one of the most important times to recognize treatment, because probably this is the easiest time to treat it. And the thing about syphilis is that it's so easy to, one shot of penicillin. If you're allergic to penicillin, you could take another oral antibiotic for 14 days if you can't tolerate the injection. But basically presents as a primary sore or lesion, which lasts about 3 to 6 weeks. So if you can, you need to look at your anatomy, I would say. Look at your anatomy. But anything characteristic about the rash you want to say from a pathology standpoint?
Well, we usually get biopsies because what happens is they're not just on, sometimes you get them like in the secondary phase, you'll see, you get them on different parts of the skin. But what happens is you see this inflammatory response, and it's a bacteria. Right. But unlike some of the bacterias where you can do a regular gram stain and see the bacteria, it's very, very thin. So you have to do a silver stain. Right. Or you have to do fluorescence, and then you can see the organisms, just tons of them.
Right. You know what? And I was going to say, because even if you're symptomatic, and this is actually something in looking at things a little bit deeper that a lot of providers don't even understand, is like how to appropriately diagnose syphilis based on the blood work, right? And so obviously for most people, well, let me not say obviously, but for a lot of people, they're going to make it on a visual diagnosis like something is not right. I have a sore here, I have an ulcer here. But what makes it different or more characteristic than herpes is that it's painless. And so if you're not looking for it, you may not see it, because once you get to the point where we're doing lab work to try and figure out what's going on, you might be in trouble, because it's hard for even providers to understand how you're supposed to accurately or appropriately diagnose syphilis from blood work, and then how to follow it, I think, to treatment completion, which is a whole regimen in itself. It's like looking at numbers, number values until the treatment is completed. Oh, shoot. But what is not completed is our sponsorship. So this portion of the show is sponsored by the Sphere exclusive team. Look for exclusive content that you can't find anywhere else. Look no further than our Sphere exclusives, only found on Patreon. We've got behind the scenes shots happening daily at the Sphere podcast studios. Each show on the podcast network curates episodes that are only delivered to Patreon subscribers. Plus, we deliver the show live from start to finish in our Discord server that's exclusive to our Patreon family. So sign up today at www.thesphere.tv/Patreon. /Patreon to join our $2, $5, or $8 Patreon tier and get access to all of the exclusive content we offer at the Sphere. Good looking out, Sphere exclusives. I love it. And this may be something that you can touch on a little bit, because by the time you get to blood work and to kind of go over it again, you start with a rash, and then from there you kind of can move on to a latent phase, and that is actually a little bit more worrisome. And then from there it can manifest into a lot of other medical conditions that can be confused with a lot of other problems, and can ultimately result in nerve problems, a neuro form of syphilis that can present like an inflammatory type symptom in the brain, which can cause delusions, confusions, hallucinations. It puts you at greater risk for HIV once you've been infected with syphilis. And so there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to get out the primary phase with syphilis. And there also is a characteristic rash once you get to tertiary or long-term syphilis, and it sort of presents as a colored, I don't know, like a purplish colored bump on the palms of the hand and the soles of the feet. And there's not many things that will present as rashes on the palms and soles, so pretty characteristic. I've seen it a few times. I've actually seen a neurosyphilis like in a really young person, which was weird. Wow. Yeah, that was actually pretty scary to diagnose, but it was there. And they've actually seen a resurgence of syphilis in the United States. So, do y'all get a lot of RPRs anymore?
Oh yeah, we get a lot, but seeing it, not probably as much. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot that we suspect or we think, oh, this must be syphilis.
Yeah.
And so the ones that are biopsied, that's usually the early phases, right?
Okay.
So if you're looking towards the end phase, like the latent phase, it's kind of like almost like strep, because in strep, people get the sore throat, right? You swab it, you treat with penicillin,
right?
Which is why you should go to the doctor if you think you have it,
right?
Because it's not the strep that causes the problem, but later on down the line, your body has an immune response to that, and the antibodies go and destroy stuff. So it's the same thing with syphilis. It's not the actual, though that does cause problems, the sores, the rashes, but the long-term effect on the neurological system is because of the antibodies.
Right.
And by then you can't use penicillin anymore to treat it.
Right.
So go into the doctor when you think you have a rash or a sore.
Right. And especially if you
better
see
to be safe
anything on
than
the
sorry.
Palms or you have palms or sole rash. I mean,
for both strep and for
strep. Yes, exactly. You're kind of late in the game, but you still want to get treatment to prevent other complications, and that's super, super important. And again, it's just a one-time shot of penicillin in most cases, unless there's pregnancy involved or some other comorbidity or it's really long-term. But so that's a little bit about syphilis, and again, it's transmitted through sexual practice or primarily through mucous membrane contact, so vaginal or anal sex. Skin mouth to mouth, well, not mouth to mouth, but mouth to oral contact. And in some cases, you can pass it a little bit easier, but it really takes a lot of contact or a depressed immune system. But so that's sort of the disease of focus. And I guess the reason why it's, so debilitating, again, is because it's unfortunate because it's so easy to treat. But as it pertains to the Tuskegee experiment and also our discussion about bias from last week, I think it's just really important to reiterate how important it is to be a part of your care and be a part of the things that happen to you in healthcare as it relates to anything you're involved in. You have to be so on top of it, and you really can't trust anyone to be vigilant as you are about your health. And when you are unable or have a knowledge deficit in terms of being able to ask questions because you don't know, and that's probably most people for a lot of different reasons or for a lot of different factors, then we start to get into some trouble of a situation where things can happen to you that you don't want to happen to you, and in this case, some really bad things. But before we get all into this topic, because it's going to be really cool, we got to say goodbye to some folks.
Yes, we have to say goodbye to Facebook Live. So if you want to hear more about this show, and we're going to talk in depth about the Tuskegee experiment, please subscribe to our show. We've got all the platforms. We've got iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, and Stitcher. Please review the show. Please give us constructive feedback. Let us know what you do like and you don't like about what we're talking about. Any suggestions about future shows, please let us know. Share this Facebook Live post and the entire show with your family and friends. And last but not least, donate to the mission. We want to bring enriched content and inspiring content each and every week. So please donate at www.thesphere.tv/donate. And we will check you next time. Please subscribe. Goodbye.
Bye, y'all. So if I were to ask you, in general, what is your thought process or just general knowledge of Tuskegee experiment, or what have you heard about it or thought about it?
It's all negative. And I was like, I wonder if I asked my son, the new generation about it, he probably would not know much about it. And I don't think we're informing them because I kind of put it to the back burner thinking, okay, this is something that happened in the past and hopefully will never happen again. Right. But it is something, to me, I think about it, something that kind of brings about ethics. Yeah. Racist or racial bias, definitely, because only a certain group of people were picked out to be part of this experiment. And then now it's the whole thing about lack of informed consent, which definitely something that does not happen, should not be happening anymore in medicine. Right. And it's just very unfortunate that it went so long.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And I think one of the bigger and kind of more interesting things that I kind of was able to look at in this case that I probably didn't think about before because I was either younger or I hadn't studied it in a while was about the economic impact and how this happened in the South. And so it's really interesting. So the Tuskegee experiment basically started roughly in the early 1900s, but you have to think about historically around this time frame. Booker T. Washington was like a really big advocate for Black Southerners in terms of just racial empowerment, in terms of encouraging African Americans to get an education, about the importance of economic development and growth. And so, we have to kind of think back to what was happening at that time. And so he had really spearheaded a lot of economic growth and education, support for education in the rural South. And so we have to think about the time frame of that. And that actually included a lot of generous support from a lot of corporations and a lot of prominent figures in the North. And so then we kind of fast forward, that these entities basically donated money into the Tuskegee Institute for Education and Research, which is all good on the surface, right? All good. But over time, something kind of went totally left. And when we look at the patient population there, it was a lot of Black sharecroppers, again, who didn't have a lot of access to education. It's not like they didn't want to be educated, but they didn't have access to education and really didn't know what they were signing up to do. And that's probably one of the biggest ethical one of a ton of ethical boundaries that were violated, and that's the issue of informed consent. And so basically these black men were asked to join the study on the preface that they were being treated for bad blood, which is a very common term in that time. to just describe a whole array of symptoms, including anemia, weakness, just anything you can think of. It was called bad blood. And so the researchers used that terminology basically to encourage people to join the study who wouldn't normally have access to care. They were promised health exams, which they did receive, not really for their benefit. They were promised they would get transport to and from, they would get meals. And so it sounded like a good deal from the outside looking in. But again, they had no idea what they were signing up for. And the interesting part is that even with having the title and knowledge of what they were studying, they still didn't understand, because they were in medical terms, what syphilis was, or what the long-term complications of syphilis were, and what the treatment was. So again, it sort of goes back to that issue of bias and how what you don't know basically can hurt you. And it's not these patients' fault who are involved in the study, but really the ethical quandrum that occurs from money, I think big business, medicine, and then ultimately the lack of respect for patients and patient care that we can see. And also of note in the studies, this has happened many times in history. In Nazi Germany, there was actually another syphilis experiment in Guatemala in which they used sex workers to transmit the disease. When that didn't go fast enough, they actually started injecting people or having people come in contact with these abrasions, these very deep abrasions across mucosal surfaces, things like that, to basically cause a syphilis infection in people. But, if we kind of just move down the timeline historically, and I think that's pretty interesting, is that in roughly 1926 or so, the government started taking a big association and interest in health research, and saw it as a big push to invest time, money, and resources to research different topics. And syphilis is one of the main ones, and see it as a major health concern. And so the initiative sort of began. And also, about 35% of people of reproductive age had been either exposed or come in contact with syphilis. And so that's partially why the government was so interested in it. And a lot of researchers knew the long-term complications of syphilis, maybe not in the black male population per se, but they knew the long-term complications. Excuse me. And so the other interesting part about this is that, again, it's not that they injected people with syphilis as many people might think, or, they gave people syphilis. They simply just admitted people into the study and either, didn't treat them.
Right.
Or they didn't have the disease already. But either way, this study was in no way of benefit to the patients involved. And that's probably the really more sinister part of this study, is that, these guys knew this off the top. And then the economic portion is really disturbing to me, because we also have to think about around this time frame, the stock market crashed. And so there wasn't as much money in big business. And so, what happens as soon as the money starts drying up, people start cutting corners. And so there probably wasn't a lot of money to be invested long term in the study, and, things start to happen. But roughly 1932 or so, that's when the study actually really, really started. And then around 1934, people started understanding more about syphilis and understanding the major side effects. And that's really what makes it bad, is that they sort of knew what was happening, and these patients had no idea. Their families had no idea as to what was going on, and that was pretty disturbing. And, oh, gosh, it does get worse. And around, the 40s, again, there's a big push to join the military. And these guys basically could have been treated as a part of the military medical care. And they were actually discouraged the military from treating people. And, it's pretty sad. And then around 1945, I think, is the time that penicillin became the accepted treatment of choice for syphilis, just because of its ease, its low cost, and its ability to treat it widespread. And they actually had not paid, but they had actually, let me not use that word because I'm not sure on that, but they actually had reached out to medical providers in the community, hospitals, and given a list of names of these 600 individuals who were being treated or who were in the experiment, and actually told them not to treat them if they come in. And I thought that was just
horrible.
Yeah, I didn't know these like little tiny details. And in addition, which was even worse, is that because of the economic push in the South, people had actually advocated for other Black professional doctors and nurses to be a part of this experiment. And so if you can imagine, hindsight 2020, and we don't know what they did know or didn't know, probably have to do a little bit more research. But if you can imagine like wanting to push for an economic and educational growth in your community, and this is what comes in, and then you're a part of it. Now, I can't say whether they knew or didn't know, and some of it may be based on the articles I was reading. They just didn't really put a lot of heavy emphasis on it, but I thought that was pretty disturbing. It might have been used also to make people feel comfortable. So that was really a major part of the process, is that they knew that there was a cure out there. They did not offer it to these patients at all, and in fact never really explained what they were being evaluated for. They took the faith of these patients that they were doing something to basically empower their health in some way, shape, or form, and didn't have good working knowledge of the experiment. Around 1947 or so, in the United States, they developed these rapid treatment centers to kind of rapidly eradicate the bacteria of syphilis. And they, again, did not offer it to the study participants, which is pretty shocking. And then roughly around 1962, and you remember around this time, like the times are changing. So there's more African Americans with access to health care. But a really important thing that you need access to is a Body by Royce. So are you looking for an experienced professional to help you maintain or even jumpstart that healthy lifestyle you've been seeking? Well, then look no further. Set up your free consultation today with Royce Thomas, owner of Body by Royce. His precision, instruction, and motivation is just what you need to reach your fitness goals. He will assist you with focus on healthy, all-natural training as well as dietary plans. Whether you need personal, group, corporate, or sports elite training, his expertise will definitely get you on the right track to a healthier lifestyle. Book your consultation today at 832-332-2407 or send an email to thebodybyroyce@gmail.com. So I'm kind of getting through the historical aspect of this because I want to get Dr. Keisha's input. But, again, so historically in 1962, times are changing. More African Americans, even though it's a small, slim percentage, are being admitted to medical school at about this time. I believe Meharry was open. I'm not sure where these students were coming from, but we did see the advent of other medical education centers for African Americans in very small number, but they were still present. And so they started, the Tuskegee Institute started having students to rotate through their program and through their research lab. And there was a lot of concern from students about the things that they were witnessing and seeing. And then around 1969 or so, the actual CDC actually was still saying that there was a need for this study, and this was actually backed up by the American Medical Association and the National Medical Association, which was a little bit scary. And the study went all the way to 1972 when finally the Associated Press broke the story that there was basically a study in the United States going on in which Black males were being allowed to suffer with syphilis without treatment. And that's actually what ended the study. It wasn't like some big ethical dilemma from the powers that be in terms of who created the study, designed the study, or executed the study. It was actually, like most things, a reporter that blew the whistle on the experiment, and that's how things came to pass. And as of late, Congress denounced the study. They did hold a huge panel to, I don't know why you need 15 people to tell you that this is unethical, and did deem the study to be unethical. And then finally in 1974 or so, a case settlement was reached, and the participants who were still living, who had participated in the Tuskegee experiment, basically received $10 million, which seems like pennies on the dollar. Well, because it is, basically. And that's kind of where we are today. I mean, over time, of course, we've had a big apology, a big national outpouring, but it still doesn't change the fact that this happened. And I think it shed a lot of light on medical ethics in a mainstream way. Because again, and this is something I didn't realize, that this did not really stop officially until the 70s. That's like only 5 years before I was born, which is a little bit scary.
That's true.
Mm-hmm. So that's all I had to say about that. But I just thought it was an interesting topic to bring to light and to kind of think about from a different perspective. And I think, again, it just kind of brings to light that if what you don't know can hurt you, and you have to be careful and cautious with that.
Very sad.
But anyway, what you reading on?
No, I was looking because, there's a similar, not similar, but it kind of brings up ethical issues in medicine. It's Henrietta Lacks.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
So,
you know what? We need a whole show on that. But go ahead and give a little preview.
So she had cancer. And basically, imagine that your cancer cells were taken and basically used for a whole bunch of experiments and treatment without your knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So it really doesn't matter if it is treatment, if it's lack of informed consent. It's that something's left out to the patient that shouldn't be left out.
Right.
And I don't think that it was 1950, 1940 where they're saying, oh, okay, well, we didn't have informed consent, so that's why this happened. It's showing you that there's racial bias. Mm-hmm. And it was more evident then, because it shouldn't be that certain patients basically were less important. That's basically, they were less important. They were considered indisposable or disposable. So therefore, let's treat them like this. Let's not treat them with this. Let's not inform them. They'll be okay. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Because I bet you if the other situation was around, or it was a certain ethnicity and the same thing was happening in 1930, they would have been treated the right way. So there was an unwritten informed consent.
I mean, but there's still a lot of, it just depends on the powers that be. Because if we look at the cases that came out of Germany, I mean, basically the Nazis were doing experiments on Jewish people, homosexuals.
So that's racial bias. Yeah. So
yeah,
so I'm saying certain
Yeah, you're
groups.
right. I'm sorry. I just categorized that a little bit.
No, yes. Certain groups were being used more than other groups.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you're exactly right. I mean, that's true. And that's what I think was so fascinating about the topic, just in general, just looking from another scope, because I learned about this obviously in school, and we've all seen movies about this, or some information, like what it is when you hear the name. There's some name recognition to it, but I think once you dive into again all the socioeconomic factors that contributed to this, and then also what contributed to nothing really being challenged. I mean, why does it take from 1936 basically to 1972 for someone to be like, this is wrong enough to stop? That's a little bit disheartening and scary, I think, for all patients, all people, no matter where you come from, because that means that anything can happen if nobody's paying attention. And I think probably a lot of this was brought to light just out of sheer probably shock. And again, the changing of historical times. But it begs the question of, what we are explaining to patients, what we're telling patients. And really, even though from the medical perspective, sometimes it seems a little bit cumbersome, why we have to really focus on informed consent. It's not about getting a piece of paper signed. It's about making sure patients know what they're entrusting you with to do, and that we're carrying out a good job. And I was telling Dr. Keisha before we sat down that, I went to a conference over the weekend. It was really interesting because there was a cardiologist there from Mississippi, and I didn't know that Mississippi was the number one in the United States for peripheral vascular disease, and actually the rate of amputation. And it also happens to be one of the poorest communities in the United States, populated with the highest amount of African Americans, and a disproportionate number who are being amputated, really due to lack of access to care and quality care.
Wow.
I mean, basically, it's. And I think the cardiologist said it best. He's like, where you live and, the color of the skin will dictate if you live here. And that's pretty scary in 2019 that we're still having these conversations. But I think, as we kind of commented on before, it's just a matter of it's a little bit hidden now. or less viewable, or things that we know to be explicitly present are not deemed as favorable, and so people know how to hide that stuff. But it's pretty scary. It was actually pretty shocking to look at the numbers. It's sort of in the same way we looked at the numbers about disparity in healthcare. I'm still sort of affected by the article and think about it kind of continuing. It's actually kind of improved my patient practice because it made me more mindful, even to myself, to, be very cognizant of what you're saying and that you are taking the patient's need into consideration first in terms of your explanation and getting permission and, just really being an advocate because they may not have anybody else ever. And I think that's a charge to all of us out there. But that was all I had.
That was all. That was very extensive, very informative.
Sorry.
Please, I think a lot of the links also should be posted up. So if you want to look at all the wonderful articles that she has acknowledged. Oh. We will have one more ad.
Oh, shoot. That's our fault. Thank you, sponsors. We appreciate you.
So this portion of the show is sponsored by Houston Housewives of Finance. Did you know that only 4 states in the United States offer financial education, which is important? 33% don't pay their bills on time. 39% of Americans carry credit card debt from month to month, and 39% of adults don't say they have enough savings. So don't become one of these statistics. Let Houston Housewives of Finance advise you on increasing your cash flow and becoming your own money manager by scheduling your complimentary personal financial strategy meeting. Contact the Houston Housewives of Finance today. It's 1-844-700-4463. That's 1-844-700-4463, or email us at info@houstonhousewivesoffinance.com. Ask us how you can participate in a complimentary financial literacy workshop near you. Houston Housewives of Finance are the new faces of the new age of financial services. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all.
Yes.
We appreciate it. Thank y'all for tuning in, and we will see you next week with another amazing and interesting topic.
All right, take care. Good evening.
Y'all.